And hey, welcome to DC Signal to Noise live stream. I guess the third week here doing this live, Jim.
Yes, here we go again.
And pardoning me here for a second with the new setup. I don't have a cough switch, so you're going to have to bear with this. Excuse me. But no, thanks for joining us. We will, like we've done the last couple of weeks, you'll see a little of the sausage making here first before we get into recording the podcast itself. But as always, join in the conversation here in the comments section on Facebook. Drop us a note or ask us a question, and we'll address it live in real time, or just say, hey, let us know you're there watching. We appreciate hearing from you and being part of this discussion. And Jim, we've got a lot to get into. Just before we went live, you and I covered some of the bases that we need to add in onto the discussion today, including some late breaking news that there are now several individuals who were part of the event Saturday announcing Amy Coney Barrett as the designee for the Supreme Court opening. There are now several people who were at that event who have now tested positive for coronavirus. So we will add that in to our discussion today.
And thankfully, she has checked in negative, and she's checked on a daily basis.
Yeah, in fact, there was a story here locally. We get a kind of a weird extra angle on the story here in South Bend, Indiana, because of her thoughts, or because of her background with Notre Dame.
Yeah,
and it turns out, according to some local reporting, that she reported having COVID-19 infection earlier in the year and recovered. And as you mentioned, is now tested regularly because she is a nominee for the Supreme Court.
Yes.
So that would, in theory, lead her to some degree of immunity from that prior infection.
Let's hope so.
Yeah, I mean, the science is still a little indefinite in that so far. So we'll get into the discussion here in just a minute. I need to pull up the email you sent me because you added a few topics. We want to be sure and get in there.
And of course, late word on an aid package. It looks like that's breaking as we speak. So,
Nancy Pelosi telling the airline industry to hold off on furloughs, that they think they've got something imminent.
Well, I would say for sure you're going to see at least a targeted bill for the airline industry. It's that serious. And she's told them, don't lay off. Because, once they lay off in the airline industry, they have to recertify. So
really?
And that's why it would take some time to bring them back. So that's why she did alert.
Yeah, okay. Are you ready, Jim? Shall we start this?
I'm ready. Here we go.
Here we go in 3, 2, 1. Welcome to Friday. Welcome to DC Signal to Noise on a very interesting, very tumultuous week. Jim Wiesmeyer from Pro Farmer joining me. I'm John Harreth from Farm Journal. And thanks to those folks who are joining us live for this. If you haven't done it yet and you're listening to the podcast every Friday, join us 2 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Central at the AgriTalk Facebook page. And we do a little live video broadcast of this, and appreciate people who check in and are part of the conversation. You can ask us questions in real time, and we love addressing that because it brings a different perspective that we aren't necessarily thinking of ourselves. It's always good to have extra voices in on the conversation.
Yes.
And Jim, let's start with the news of the day. Of course, news breaking overnight that President Trump and First Lady Melania Trump testing positive for COVID-19. That's after Trump aide Hope Hicks had tested positive the day before. And now some new news, Jim, that several people who were at the event Saturday announcing the nomination of Amy Coney Barrett for the Supreme Court, several people involved in that have now tested positive, not only the Trumps, but also Senator Mike Lee out of Utah and Father John Jenkins, president of Notre Dame University, although Jenkins is saying he got COVID from a colleague, but still that's 4 people who were at the same event Saturday testing positive in a very short time frame, or 5 people.
Yeah. And if we've learned anything, this is highly contagious. So you do have to, it is cause for concern about that Saturday meeting and post events after that, because Trump went to another event. And I know the Washington Post, who loves to dig him anyway, healthy or unhealthy, is now tracing who all he met with after he knew about Hope Hicks. And I was watching Hannity last night, and that's when it was revealed on the show that Hope Hicks had tested positive. And I thought, I'm going to go to bed, because I knew instinctively that was a possibility that, Trump could get it, and he did. So, and we went from there early this morning on, as far as market implications, policy implications, etc.
Well, let's go through some of those implications, starting with on the election. First of all, it changes the narrative in a way that the president didn't want it to go. I mean, this is a story that the Trump campaign did not want to focus on. Now it's going to be probably 2 weeks of very direct focus on coronavirus and management of coronavirus. So really not a positive narrative for the president in just the final weeks before this election. Plus, it takes him out of the arena, literally, in his campaign events, which have been the lifeblood of his campaign.
Yeah, it caps him for a while here. Now, since he has, symptoms, and the White House is saying mild symptoms, but I've learned mild can mean many things. But the most important is if his oxygen level goes down, and we're going to see if the doctors or other spokesmen report on that. I was told he had a cough and a fever, but I think this is at least increases the odds that we will not have an October 15th, debate in Miami, or if we do, it won't be the person to person or the element that we saw on the first one, even though it was going to be a town hall. As far as his campaign, it depends on how long he's out, and and on the severity, but it takes him out of his game. There's no doubt about it. And it also, John, raises the stakes in the vice presidential debate, coming up, because of if there is a negative factor, additional negative factors in the president's health, that just makes the focus on Pence that much more.
Well, I think it puts a focus on both of them, not only because of coronavirus and age issues of the main candidates, and very likelihood of succession on either side, but also because of the tenor of the presidential debate this week. I think there's an increased focus on the Pence-Harris debate, that this may be our only chance of having a really substantive discussion.
Yes. On the debate night, I know it's been discussed, many places, and I thought the most interesting thing I watched was a focus group interviewer who said afterwards that the people he polled, that they broke down into 1/3. 1/3 thought that Biden won the debate. 1/3 thought Trump won the debate, and 1/3 were just totally disgusted. And I fall into that third camp. But, the political experts that I've talked with since that, more than a few told me, the people who watch the debates are the proponents of both sides. And a lot of independents, I don't know why, they typically do not watch the debate, because lately they see it as theater. And then we saw a lot of theater, a negative, theater on Tuesday night. So, and when you look at the returns of the viewership, a lot of people turned off the program after 30 minutes or so. So that tells me they were disgusted as well.
Yeah, well, Jim, you and I and Chip Flory and Sean Haney were all texting back and forth the night of the debate, during the debate. And I told you at the time, well, let me back up a little bit. When I talk win or lose in a debate, I'm not looking at who necessarily made the best political points. I'm looking at who, bottom line, gained or lost voters in that debate. And I told you at the end of the debate Tuesday night that I thought Biden lost that debate. Trump won it. They both diminished themselves, but that Biden lost more, because I thought that at the moment that Biden appeared weak, and that played into the narrative that the Trump campaign was trying to sell about diminished mental capacity. However, since then, the Trump campaign has, for whatever reason, decided to make the racism Proud Boy story carry it out into a 3-day story. So, and rather than taking advantage of what they had out of that debate, they've carried it into a 3-day negative story that has now led into yet another narrative that they don't want to be discussing in the campaign, which is COVID-19.
This is so typical of President Trump and his people, to turn what some people called victory into semi-defeat. But again, I've learned to talk to the Trump people to see what their conclusions were, because he won in 2016. So I want to see what they say. They were quite confident that the people he was after, he addressed that in his strategy. Whether I and others agreed with it or not means nothing. And then a number of them told me the big plus for Trump right now is the new voter registrations around the United States. They are eclipsing Biden and the Democrats. So that's part of their strategy. So again, that's from the Trump people, but they were quite confident that they executed their plan. How surly that it was to many people.
Well, and that may well be, but I think the other argument against that is that you have seen other Republicans try to put more distance between themselves and Trump after that, and that is a real cost to that campaign, especially if they continue to do so in the coming days. But let's get back to the issue of the president testing positive for COVID-19.
Sure.
Another issue of this is, and we saw an example with Boris Johnson, Prime Minister of Great Britain, who did have COVID-19 and had a very, very severe case of it. And we saw it distract from the act of governing in his government for a period of time, particularly early on in that. And so do we see that same thing happen here in the U.S.? And if that does happen, do you see China and Russia take advantage of that vacuum and try to push their own narratives in this?
More Putin and Russia than China, I would think. Heck, they do it when things seemingly are going good in the United States. But China, I think, would be more arm's length. But I will never put anything that Putin could not try try out. Again, the forceful nature of Trump does raise the impacts if this lasts longer than what they're saying at the White House. Now, Vice President Pence has shown in the past that he's a very stable plotter, sort of a, White House official. So that's kind of the yin and yang of this White House, duel. But there are a lot of officials inside the White House who can help out on this. But again, I'll bow on Trump is so involved in everything that it does raise the stakes, John.
Well, yeah, and that brings up another point, is that Trump is the White House. Trump is the government. There is nothing that happens there that isn't of his will. So, and we all hope that this is a very mild case. It goes away quickly, but we have to look at the other possibilities. And if there is it comes to a point where President Trump is in some way incapacitated, this is a White House that has followed really no regular norms, and so are they prepared for a 25th Amendment letter? And two, does Donald Trump realistically sign over power of the presidency to Mike Pence at any point?
Definitely he does not want to, and it would be, he's about to go out. He's feigning or whatever. Eventually, I think that the White House Chief of Staff Meadows is a good organizer. So I think they better have contingency plans, and that's the role of a president. But he must follow. You mentioned Johnson from the UK. He's only 54. And although he's overweight as well, like many of us, he had the younger factor going for him. The statistics on this are clear. If you're Trump's 74 and he's overweight. He doesn't have what we know of as existing other problems. So I think that helps to a degree, but he's in the category that things can go awry very easily, pneumonia, etc. And that's why the breathing part, the oxygen level is so important right now. But to answer your initial topic, he would have to be pretty bad for the president himself to sign a 25th Amendment.
Yeah, and that, quite frankly, that concerns me, because that could slip from very bad to not able to sign pretty quickly and miss that window, which creates its own problems. I mean, do we have Al Haig coming back and saying I'm in charge? And
yeah.
So hopefully we don't come to that issue. Seems to. Hold on, I'm checking my notes because I had one more thing I wanted to. I know what I want to talk about with this. Does this add pressure to find a solution on COVID aid?
I think so. The market's showing you've got the Dow now up, 5 points after being down substantially before the market opened in the futures market, and then afterwards. What we're hearing right now is, at minimum, John, you're going to have an airline funded bill. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, Democrat from California, put out the word to the airline industries to stop laying off people, or to withhold laying off, as a clear signal that at minimum they're going to come up with an airline aid package, because in the airline industry, once you furlough a person, they have to be recertified, and that takes a few days, if not longer. So the signal is there. Recall that Pelosi previously said she didn't want to piecemeal this aid program. That was a mistake, at the time, and it's vivid now. So she doesn't make all the right decisions all the time. That's clear to me.
Yeah, and I find that unusual. I guess I shouldn't be too surprised that they're looking at such a narrow package, but that may be the only victory they can get right now, is just to save the airline industry, and everybody else is going to have to wait until the election, after the election.
That's only if they still, again, to be fair, Pelosi and, Mnuchin, the Treasury Secretary, and the White House, Trump himself, and you had Larry Kudlow, National Economic Council administrator, on the various networks, cable news, this morning was more upbeat, where he has been negative previously this week on a chance of an overall package, and that got the market going as well. There still are a lot of hurdles that Pelosi and the Democrats are going to have to pull out a lot of language, what we call either poison, provisions, or, positioning provisions, such as aiding the undocumented immigrants and things like that. That simply won't fly with some in her own party, let alone the Republicans. So, and I think they're looking at the marketplace. Some strategists at the investment houses in this time in DC and in New York put out reports this morning. They thought this increases the chances of another overall aid package because of the sensitivity of the markets to the situation. So they're trying to connect, dots here.
Yeah, well, indeed, but time is growing short, and I find it interesting. I found this battle interesting all along, in that Nancy Pelosi seems to continue to think that there is some way that the Democrat Party comes out with a winning issue on this. And as we've discussed before on here, I think they're all either winners or losers. Well, I think really no matter what, they're losers on this, but they can minimize their losses for both parties if they move forward with a package. I don't see how with the larger electorate, either side makes this look like a win.
Well, behind the scenes, you do have more than a few Democrats thinking that they're going to run the board November 3rd or whenever we get the results of the election, then that they'll have a trifecta. They'll win the White House, they'll keep the House, and they'll regain control of the Senate. And if they truly believe that, and I think that they do, and some of the polls are showing that now, they think that they can get a better deal, contoured, etc. But the moderates in the Democratic Party clearly want substantial aid that can pass the Senate with a combination of both Republicans and Democratic senators. And that bodes for a package in the $1.5 trillion area. Mnuchin earlier this week floated a $1.62 trillion package, and even some Republicans in the Senate said that was too high. But at least we know the parameters now. They're getting closer if they can strip some of those, positioning or poison pill elements of the package, John.
Yeah, but then you're talking February at the earliest before any payments made. What waste is laid between now and then, and people not being able to pay rent, wages lost, et cetera, between now and then. I think that's kind of a dangerous path to go down.
It is. Once you had the jobs report is clearly signaling we had 661,000 new jobs, breaking the 1 million or higher force that we've been seeing. So the market's starting to get signals that we're running out of gas again on this economy. So and what I always say is, if they don't listen to the Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell, Jay Powell, he has almost pleaded with both members of both parties in Congress at three hearings last week. He urged them to come up with another fiscal package. So when you don't listen to a Federal Reserve Chairman who knows his stuff, you're going to be in trouble. So that's why I know Pro Farmer, we were one of the few who kept on holding out hope, or whatever way you want to call it, that a package would eventually be agreed to. And as we wrote, when it looked like it was falling apart, we just had too much common sense, is how we wrote it. Common sense would dictate that they should have a package here. You can cuss and discuss what level there is. I know there's growing concern of this town, especially on the Republican side, finally, of the growing deficit and bulging debt. But again, I will bow to Powell when he says you need more, fiscal that he can't provide. He's got his tools from the macro side that I think they should deliver.
I would agree. Well, on the positive side, Gary Rasmussen checking in on comments saying he's already got his CFAP 2.0 check. That came quickly.
Wow. That's good news. You're breaking news on the podcast. I appreciate that, Gary. And another good thing relative to the stopgap spending measure, funding our government through December the 11th. We're into fiscal year 2021 as of October 1. That let USDA go out with notices saying, okay, the various payments now will be made by this date. The Conservation Reserve Program payments, PLC payments, etc., and CFAP too. But that's I'll bow to FSA on that. They got those monies going out there. Now, what state did he say? What state he's from?
No, he doesn't say what state. So, Gary, if you're still watching, let us know what state you're at.
That'll help me out.
That is record fast there, but I'm sure there is pressure to get those out quickly as the election is, 30 days away now. We have seen what the Democrats have put in the HEROES 2 Act for agriculture. There are some very key provisions in there. Oh, Gary says it's Michigan. So there you go, Jim.
Michigan. Okay.
Yeah. So there are some important things for agriculture in this bill that don't look like they're controversial in the negotiations with either the White House or what will eventually be negotiations with Senate Republicans. Most notably, some changes for dairy provisions, and as you and I have talked about repeatedly, the much needed indemnity for livestock producers who had to euthanize animals in the height of the COVID and the processing plant shutdowns. And again, that's not even a fight over money. The money is there. They just need the authorization to use CCC money to do that.
Yes, as is for the ethanol, for the refiners, the ethanol, and also textile mills. But now the difference between the two party packages is that the latest revised package from the House Democrats did not include their original $16 billion for additional CCC funding. The Democrats' $1.62 billion approach included $20 billion additional funding for the Commodity Credit Corporation. So I think that's one that I will watch out for to see whether or not that made it in any final compromise package, John.
All right, we'll watch for that. Michael says Indiana has got CFAP 2 checks out as well. So
wow.
That
is good. That
is good.
I gave several speeches this week, via webinar, and the working capital is the key that we need to get higher levels of working capital. And yes, it's coming from government payments, taxpayers, but it's still much needed, cash flow there for a host of reasons. So that's good. When all is said and done this calendar year, it looks like government payments are going to make up around 40% or so of net cash and net farm income. That signals that something's very wrong in the marketplace, but it shows the strategic nature of U.S. agriculture, that the government from both political parties is there to provide income transfer payments for the farm and ranch sector and dairy.
All right, and Jim, I have a feeling that ties into the note you sent me that you want to talk about. There's a farm bill baseline problem looming.
Yes, when you add up all the payments that we've seen from the Trade Mitigation Program, MFP, the two versions of CFAP, we're right around $50 billion. That's not in a farm bill baseline. So once we get into overtly talking about and writing the next farm bill, where's that money or a portion of that going to come from? So that's disconcerting. Hopefully we will have a significant increase in prices across the board, not just crops, but specialty crops and the meat and dairy sector. But the agriculture policymakers that I've talked with the last few weeks say that's going to be a problem in the year ahead as we really start talking about the need for a new farm bill. So that's a problem.
Yeah, and I'm sure most farmers would answer, well, they want that money to come from the marketplace rather than where it's been coming from. But it's going to take some transition to get there.
Yes. And does that mean that I think Congress won't deliver? No, but you have to balance. Where are the cuts? It's hard to cut. It's hard to find cuts anywhere in order to move it from one title to the next, and that's a problem. And let's just hope we get the turnaround in the flat commodity prices by the time that they start writing the bill. So we still have time, John, but it is a concern there.
Well, and also, if there is a flip in party control in Washington, that also flips some of the priorities of the ag committees in drafting the next farm bill. Certainly, there's going to be a renewed emphasis on SNAP and food programs within the farm bill if the Democrats are in control of both chambers of Congress. You're probably going to see more focus on nutrition overall and specialty growers.
Absolutely.
And so that's going to impact that conversation as well.
Absolutely. What the Democrats are already saying is some of these, like the more funding for the WICs, for the WIC program, women, infants, and children, they want to make that permanent increase in fundings. And on the nutrition side, the food stamp program, the history clearly shows that when the Democrats are in, they want to have a big boost in food stamp program funding, lessen the requirements, et cetera. And that you can just say that indeed would happen if the House, the Senate, and the White House, a trifecta, all go toward the Democrats. You're going to see substantial changes, not only in farm policy, but in other policies, John. And that's where the focus will be, on a different type of farm bill under that scenario, which you just said. You'll change probably a pretty good focus. They'll try to target these fundings. There'll be a big discussion, even though you don't save all that much money on payment limitations. That they will tighten the requirements on who's eligible for farm program payments and at what level. But there could be another revenue stream. There will be another revenue stream for agriculture relative to one of the clear top 3 priorities of any Biden administration, and that's in the climate change area. And that's where we can talk carbon credits. We can talk boosting the conservation security program, conservation reserve program. I should have said conservation stewardship program, and things like that, which I clearly believe is the next revenue stream for agriculture. So it's not all negative, relative to the future, and who are going to be the players? Because I really spent a lot of time this week on the phone and emails in the Minnesota race for House Agriculture Committee Chairman Collin Peterson, who has forgotten more on farm policy than many people know. So he's very good on farm policy, and he's a good campaigner, but boy, the experts I talked with, he's in deep trouble in Minnesota against his challenger, who is well funded. I think she's has more money in her campaign pool, Michelle Fischbach. And when I asked the Minnesotans who I called and emailed, what are some of the reasons, and they told me Minnesota people, more than a few, are upset about the direction of their state and some national policy. If you recall the flare-ups in Minneapolis, and Fischbach is trying to tie Peterson to those flare-ups, etc. And with Trump on the ticket, he will bring out additional voters, no ifs, ands, or buts, and there's less split party tickets now, and that's also will be another negative on Peterson. I guess the biggest, the most surprising thing that I picked up this week is when and I can't name them, is when I talked to a few Democrats as far as what they thought about Peterson's race, and they admitted that they think this is his last rodeo, as one. I should have said rodeo, his last rodeo, as one person told me. That doesn't mean Peterson's going to lose for sure, but it does mean that I think some internal polls and other pollsters are showing, Fischbach up by more than a few percentage points.
Yeah, in fact, we saw some of her first polling this week. It was a Republican poll, so keep that in mind. But it was a 10-point spread. Fischbach 52%, so showing her above that 50% margin, 52% to 42%. So very, if that's to believed, and you know how we feel about polling here these days.
Yes.
But
I use it when I want to. I don't believe him most of the time, but if it fits a storyline I'm working on, I'll use it. I mean, that's being transparent, but it's true. But I couldn't believe the consensus of the number of people that I talked with. Again, we have a good month. We have 1 month to go, and Peterson has shown in the past that he can pull it out. But boy, he has never had a candidate as fully funded going against him in an atmosphere in a state. I don't think that Governor Walz in Minnesota could get reelected at this particular time. You've got a lot of people upset in that state, and Trump brings out that vote. And you'll recall he went back to Minnesota again this week.
Yeah, Wanda checking in saying we need Colin Peterson back in Congress. You're not going to hear us endorse anybody, but I will say,
no.
And I think you'd agree, Jim, that it would be a huge loss for agriculture if Colin Peterson were not in Congress, because he has been such a steadfast. He argues hard for agriculture, both on the Ag Committee, and then also carries forward a number of votes with him in the interest of agriculture on the House floor.
Yeah, and he's got Pelosi's ear, and he will go against his party. I mean, he votes in favor of the Republicans more often than some of what we call the rhinos, Republicans in name only. I've interviewed him.
I hate that term, Jim.
I know. It's a shot that I shouldn't even say, but once in a while I do. I've talked with Representative Peterson more than a few times over my long career, and his innate knowledge of not just agriculture, but the ethanol. He is really a pseudo expert on ethanol years before. And he knows he was on this E20, E25 as the sweet spot years ago. I know in conversations with myself, and he's also good at sugar beet. I mean, I give a lot of sugar speeches, and he comes from the largest sugar beet growing district, and he has helped protect that program from very onslaught people who just, number one, don't understand that we need a quota type based program because of the subsidies around the world that would mean a pouring in of foreign sugar into this country. Yes, it's not an open market, but it's not a fair market anyway. And he can articulate that in a really good fashion. So yes, we would lose a lot of institutional knowledge, which brings up whenever I'm on a program now, I don't want to go there, but I'll go there again here. The parlor game, if Biden would win, who are some of the potential people who would head up USDA and other people in his cabinet? There's a big element I've got when I made my updated calls this week on that, not just for agriculture. Agriculture, the list is held fairly fast. Krista Harden, who used to be deputy secretary under Obama administration, very close to Vilsack, former Secretary Tom Vilsack. Heidi Heitkamp came up, North Dakota, defeated Senator. Sherry Bustos from Illinois. But I would think the Democrats would want to keep her in Congress because she could be one of the potentials that would eventually replace Speaker Pelosi if she ever leaves. Beth Ford's name came up. She's the CEO of Land O'Lakes. I had not heard her name before. And Michael Skuse usually is at number 1 or 2. He was former undersecretary in the Obama administration and from, Delaware, close friends with Biden. Yes. But the element that came up to me is when I got to EPA, which I think is going to be very important in any Biden administration. I was told, you should want to know that they're talking about, they'll call it something else, but like a climate czar in the White House. And I said, that could be Jay Inslee from the governor of Washington State, who's been very proponent on climate change and the need for a lot of funding and, programs on that. So that came out. And I've said before on this program, a potential administrator of the Environmental Protection Agency would be Mary Nichols she's in California now, but she used to be a high-level official in EPA for years. And let's just put it not so lightly. She is not favorably inclined for corn-based ethanol at all. So that should raise some concern in the corn industry if she were to come in at either EPA administrator or a high level, capacity. And as far as U.S. trade rep, I couldn't get people to bite on that one other than Darcy Vetter, who is a good person. She's from, from Nebraska, has been in USTR before, and she'll either be deputy or the U.S. trade rep. But I don't think Biden's going to focus that much if he is president the first year or so on trade policy, John.
Interesting. So going back to USDA, if Colin Peterson loses that race, does he move to the top of the list for USDA?
I think that he will be on the list. Some people tell me he's too, quote, moderate for for any Biden administration.
Oh, wow.
And some people try to convince me that Biden is a moderate himself, but how can you be a moderate when you don't answer the question whether or not your party's going to pack the Supreme Court and do away with the filibuster? That's not being a moderate. I think Colin could do good. I don't think that he would want to do all that work outside of direct agriculture that he likes, production agriculture. But I can't speak for Colin. But he would be a good agriculture secretary because he would be very transparent.
Yeah, and again, knows the issues backwards and forwards from his years writing farm bills. Let's talk about the polling data just a little bit, because I've seen a lot of pundits this week, Jim, starting to turn towards a tone of they think this thing is baked in, and we know how dangerous that is. But have you seen that? I've been surprised at the number that seemed to think at this point that the Democrats have crossed the point of no return in taking this race.
Yes, I've seen it across the board. One of the people that I do respect, even though he was wrong in 2016, Charlie Cook, and he early on, I mean, this was well over a month ago, he just had it in. He just said, there's not a question. But then in a column this week, you always try, especially if you're an election analyst, you always try to talk yourself out of your previous prediction. That's, second guessing and third guessing. And he addressed that in a column. And from what I remember, he said, he had a very good friend in California who told him, boy, Charlie, you're out there. And so he went back and rethought. And then he said, I'm still saying this because he went into Trump's popularity or lack thereof consistent versus history. And he just didn't think that he could, at this particular time in our country, win re-election. But the Republicans keep telling me that these polls do not accurately pick up the Republican vote, and especially a Trump vote, where either people don't answer questionnaires, or if they do, they lie and can go to confession, I guess. So I learned a lesson in 2016. Look at the polls, but don't necessarily believe them because of the moving nature. It's almost like agriculture and doing surveys. It's getting harder and harder to get an accurate assessment on the crop situation because so many farmers do not fill out, and they should. They don't fill out those forms, so it's getting harder. So you have to take different methods, such as satellite imagery, etc. And I think the pollsters in the elections are going to have to come up, with better ways of doing it, because landlines don't work anymore. A lot of people don't have landlines anymore, etc. So, yeah, I can see a consensus building amongst the elitist in the pollster industries. But we've been down that path before, John.
Yeah, I am seeing and looking at some of the speculation today, I am seeing a narrative building that I could believe, but I don't know it's true yet. But in 2016. Yeah, you saw a lot of people that just didn't like either choice. And I think you had a lot of people that might have been drawn towards Hillary, saying, I can't even go there. I'm just not going to vote in the presidential race. And I think you may be seeing the mirror image of that happening in this case, in that there are some people who may have voted for Donald Trump in the past who don't like either candidate, who may leave that line blank because of frustration of what they're saying. I don't know that that's a fact yet, but I could see. I think there's some merit in that narrative that others are talking about.
Well, several of the emails that I got after the debate went along the lines of, "Is there a third-party candidate I can vote for?"
Yeah,
they were looking for, or none of the above to write in. I did get a few of those, but a lot of people in this great country, they're just frustrated now because the lack of the childishness that we saw in the debate. But again, I think that they had their strategies and they executed them right or wrong. And the issues, I can come to the only conclusion that Trump is not detailing his vision for the next 4 years, that it just will be more of the same of that we saw in the first 4 years. That's what it tells me. The law and order, making sure our defense expenditures are there, regulation or lack of, less regulation, and get the economy back to where it was before the pandemic onslaught. Biden is far more detailed of what he wants, to such a degree, however, that if Biden were the president, I think his biggest concern in his first 4 years will be his own party, because of the tug and pull of the far left people that will try to get him to move further and further left.
Yeah, and you combine that with, if he were to win, you combine that pull from the left with the residual from the 4 years of Trump, and that narrative is going to go on well into at least the first 2 years of the next presidency, and so that is going to be difficult to deal with.
It will, absolutely. Plus, on top, we've got that debt situation that is just a big bugaboo for the years ahead. So, that's why the economy, if Biden were to win, some analysts, more than a few analysts I read and listened to this week, said, don't necessarily think that any Biden win will be bad for the economy because of his $4 trillion spending. So he'll pump a lot of money initially into the economy in various programs, and that has some merit to me. But sooner or later, you have to offset all those expenditures.
Yeah, the bill comes due at some point, but again, neither party has been terribly concerned about that for the last 4+ years. So. Yeah. Last question that I forgot when we were on the appointments at USDA, and that is, we talked about this a couple weeks ago, Steve Censky stepping down at the start of November, going back to the American Soybean Association, where he was CEO before going to USDA. So, well, number one, are they going to replace Steve Censky? And if so, who are they going to replace him with?
Well, they should. Bill Northey has been mentioned to me. Greg Eibach and Ted McKinney. All those are under secretaries. They know what they're doing, and that's the likelihood. Now, they will have to be fulfilled. Now, I know Bill Northey has an excellent chief of staff that could go into his current role as Undersecretary of Farm Production and Conservation. And I got a few emails. Would if Trump wins, would Perdue continue as Ag Secretary? And he said last week that he would want to continue. So, but what if he doesn't? Some of the names that I've heard is Kim Reynolds, the current governor of Iowa, Kristi Noem, current governor of South Dakota. There's a trend here. And Pete Ricketts, current governor of Nebraska. So those were some of the three that, when I made the rounds the last few weeks, that jumped out at me.
For those three names that you mentioned for chief of staff at USDA, wouldn't Northey make the most sense because he's had the largest and most public profile at USDA over the last couple of years?
Yes, and he's here now. He understands the execution of farm bills. He's a good crisis manager relative to his time in Iowa with the bird flu incident, if you recall. And he's just a nice guy, that works with both parties. I mean, I've had Democrats tell me, boy, he's a farmer, so he's a nice person.
Yeah, I have yet to meet anybody who doesn't like Bill Northey.
No, if you don't like him,
there's probably a problem.
Take a pill. Take a pill. Take a pill.
All right. Well, on that positive note, what are you watching for Signal the coming week, Jim?
Yes, and the signals I'm going to be watching for this weekend is where we at on. I'm looking at the market here now. The Dow's down about 20 points. Where are we at relative to the ongoing talks between Pelosi and Mnuchin on a more broader aid package? If not, then they'll rally around a very skinny airline approach. And of course, now we're on a hourly monitoring of the president relative to his positive ratings, John, because that's going to be all we talk about in earnest in this town relative to the markets, the elections, etc. The Supreme Court nominee, Barrett, they came out of the Senate Judiciary Committee saying the timeline has not changed. The hearings will start October the 12th. They want to vote on her out of the committee October 22nd. The Majority Leader Mitch McConnell has not said what the floor timeline will be, but there is cause concern if this pandemic positives increase, especially for members of the Senate Judiciary Committee. So I'll be watching that as well, John.
Yeah, in fact, there's been some talk that send the Senate home next week to minimize any further potential spread of COVID amongst that cohort, and then bring them back for the hearings the following week. Or as you've pointed out, there's precedent now to do that hearing virtually,
but you can't proxy vote, at least what I was told this morning, in the Senate. You can in the House. So, but I think, you can feel it in DC now that President Trump, getting that positive test. Now they're a lot more worried, especially in the Republican Party, that this thing could spread. So I think the element of getting out of town, and they're getting out of town, is real, and you can do it over the phone.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to watch in the coming week if there are any more positive cases come out of that event on Saturday announcing Amy Coney Barrett as the nominee. So lots to watch in the coming week. We'll catch y'all up on it again next Friday. Again, a reminder that if you want to join the live broadcast and ask us questions in real time, catch us at 2 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Central at the AgriTalk Facebook page. With that, Jim, thanks so much.
Sure. Thank you. And AgriTalk on Tuesday, I think we're going to have an election show. So kind of tune in for that one as well.
Yeah, on election night, November 3rd, you and I are going to take on, we'll be on agweb.com and some of the Facebook pages as well for Farm Journal at 9 Central, 10 Eastern. Who knows if we'll know anything by that time, but we'll at least analyze the races where they stand at that point. And we will have some, at least if we don't know anything in the presidential race, we'll at least have some inklings in some of those other key ag races, like that Minnesota 7th race with House Ag Chairman Colin Peterson. So we will. And
any listener or viewer who you have your comments, you're the ground truth as far as the signals that I've learned to respect. Email us, and John, you can tell them how they can email us for any comments you have.
Yeah, signal to noise at farmjournal.com. Just write all out, signal to noise at farmjournal.com. Yeah, we love getting that email and hearing your perspective and getting us to think a little more on something. We always appreciate that.
Absolutely.
So with that, we wrap up this week's edition of DC Signal to Noise.